We've already mentioned at times that the amount of lift which is created is able to be changed. So let's look at the factors that affect lift. The factors that affect lift are firstly, angle of attack. An increase in angle of attack will increase the lift being generated. If we start with a conservative 4-degree angle, and then increase that angle to say, 10 degrees, you can see that the lift produced increases. However, we can only increase lift in this way up to a certain point. The reason for that is called a stall. It's an aerodynamic condition in which the angle of attack becomes so steep, the air can no longer flow smoothly over the airfoil. You can see in this diagram in the yellow line, that the lift produced reaches a certain point, and then declines rapidly. That is what a stall is. It's a rapid decrease in the amount of lift being produced. The second factor affecting lift is airspeed. That's because the higher the air velocity, which is to say airspeed, the more energy it can impart on a surface. Speed is simply, what distance does it travel in a given amount of time? So if our wing travels a further distance in the same amount of time, it will have passed through a faster airflow, energy of motion, which will create a lower static pressure. This, as you now know, creates more lift. Let's go back to camber now. We spoke of it briefly before. It's the amount of curve in an airfoil, either above the chord line or below it. A low camber wing would have a smaller curve, and a higher camber wing would have a higher camber or curve. Different airplanes have different needs in regard to camber. It's an immensely large topic, too large for the scope of these lessons. One way we can control the amount of camber is through the position of the ailerons. These are the control surfaces on the trailing side of the wings which move up and down. These are discussed in much more detail in further lessons and are of the utmost importance to controlling any airplane. The air density is another factor affecting lift. Temperature and pressure both affect the air's density, and are covered in great detail in further lessons. By air density, we mean how many particles of air are in a certain space. The more air molecules, or particles in that space, the more dense with air it is. The worst options, and the combination which creates the least dense air, would be a high altitude, and a hot temperature. So a hot summer's day at a high altitude airport would be the least desirable air, as it is less dense and has less particles in a given space. That means less air flowing over the wing, and creating less lift. Another important factor would be the area of the wing itself. It goes to say that a jumbo aircraft needs a jumbo wing. A smaller airplane doesn't need a jumbo wing because it doesn't need to produce jumbo-size lift. On the other hand, a glider has a long wing which has a fairly high wing area. This helps it to create as much lift as possible without being able to use an engine. To look at this further, moving air imparts pressure on the surface area of a wing. PSI, or pounds per square inch, is a way of measuring that pressure. The larger the area, the more total pressure the area has. And that's because, looking at the diagram, the larger the area of the wing, the more surface of the wing is in contact with the airflow. So there you have the factors that affect the amount of lift that's created. It's very important to a pilot, as the amount of lift produced determines the performance of the airplane. This performance determines if we can land or take off in certain conditions. It also affects the speed we can fly, as well as how high we can climb. So the question then, is what can we as pilots control? Really, we can only control the angle of attack and the airspeed. To a degree, we can change the camber and wing area with flap positions, and the camber with control deflections. But, they are specialized usage and will be discussed in further lessons.